Hi everyone and welcome to my coverage of Game 5 from the World Chess Championships 2014. With the scores tied after 4 games, this game was quite significant. A decisive victory would of course be very good for either side. Anand had white and again opened with d4. And given how his previous games have gone with d4, especially the win in Game 3, this was easy to understand. Carlsen again responded with knight f6, and after c4 he played e6, which is more normal for him as opposed to the Grunfeld which we saw in Game 1. Anand now sidestepped the Nimzo Indian with knight f3, so then came b6, going into the Queen's Indian. Anand played the main line g3, preparing bishop g2 to challenge the long diagonal, which black's obviously going to be playing on after b6. So now Carlsen played bishop b4 check, and this is an unusual line and perhaps aimed at surprising Anand a little, or at least taking the game down a less travelled route, which is what Carlsen usually likes to do. Often black will play bishop a6 before bishop b4, which can lead to some sharp variations, but by playing this move, bishop b4 first, Carlsen avoids most of those lines. So bishop d2 and now bishop e7. And bishop takes d2 is also playable but can result in a passive position. And in the bishop a6 and bishop b4 check lines, the idea is to drag the bishop onto a square that it doesn't want to be on, and that's why it's played, although it looks like a loss of tempo. In that line, bishop e7 is played afterwards as well. So knight c3, now bishop b7, bishop g2, c6, preparing d5, and the Queen's Indian is one of the few openings where black is considered equal quite early on, but it's also a bit drawish, so it's debatable whether it's a worthwhile opening to play, but I mean if you're playing for a draw, definitely it's one worth knowing. So Anand now struck in the center with e4, and then came d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, and now knight e5, which is unveiling the bishop on g2 against the bishop b7. It means that d takes c4 can't be played, and this is also a nice centralizing move, of course. So castles, and we're still in theory. Carlsen played a knight c6, and then came c takes d5, which was the novelty of the game as far as I could see in the databases. Queen a4 is another way to play it, maintaining this tension on c6 and preventing d takes c4. So c takes d5, and Carlsen, seemed to be in some kind of preparation at this point because he was playing quickly, and he continued with the engine line knight takes e5, which is best for black to keep the balance in the position. Anand didn't capture right away, but he played d6, which makes things a little bit tricky. This is attacking the bishop on b7 and the bishop on e7, but black is already a piece up as things stand, so he doesn't have to worry, he's not losing a piece here. Carlsen played knight c6, which is best. If instead bishop takes g2, white is doing well after d takes e7, attacking the queen. Queen takes e7, d takes e5, bishop f1 is best, but now e takes f6, queen f6, queen f1, and white has 2 pieces against a rook and a pawn, which should stand him in good stead. So Carlsen played knight c6. Now d takes e7 is forced, and after queen takes e7 came bishop g5, which is an irritating pin that Carlsen chose to break immediately with h6. And now Anand recognizes that he doesn't have to retreat the bishop straight away. He can advance in the center with d5 instead, and this is the strongest move. And this is kind of play, that you can do when you can see positions and the tactics and so on inside them, like Anand can. I mean, too often in club games, after a move like h6, you just simply automatically retreat the bishop. But obviously, what sets grandmasters and strong players apart is that they see that that these automatic moves aren't, mandatory, and that you can play other ways. So d5 is the strongest move, and Carlsen played knight a5. He's simply trying to neutralize Anand and steer the game towards a draw. At least that's how it seems. After this game, on the match schedule, he has 2 whites in a row. So it's easy to understand that he wants to draw this one. Because obviously having white twice is definitely an advantage in various different ways. So knight a5 is what he played here. If instead of rook a d8 to try and make a pin, then queen a4 holds it for white. For example, knight a5, bishop f6, queen f6, rook a d1, e d5, with approximate equality. So knight a5, and now bishop takes f6. Anand goes for the simplest path, perhaps concerned that Carlsen was in preparation. Also interesting here was d6. Queen d8 is forced, or it starts getting messy and bad for black pretty fast. So then bishop f6, queen f6, and now queen a4 with the idea of d7. But the question remains as to whether this pawn on d6 will be an asset or a weakness to white. It's quite far advanced, so it's difficult to defend. And in any case, Carlsen was clearly prepared in this line, and therefore Anand was probably wise to avoid it. So instead of that, bishop f6 was played. So Carlsen played queen f6, and as in game 3, Carlsen opted to keep his pawn structure sound after the next move, but the engines preferred f takes e6 after d takes e6. Carlsen played queen e6, just keeping his pawns and his general position on the king side solid. But white now has a little bit of an edge after rook e1. It's just taking the open file with tempo. So queen f6 to keep some pressure on b2, which Anand was happy to ignore. Knight d5 was a nice centralizing move, again with tempo on the queen. And Carlsen now went for a slightly risky line with bishop takes d5, but playing instead queen takes b2 runs into tactical problems pretty fast after rook e2. It's just basically unsound. So bishop d5, and now rook a d8, pinning the bishop. Queen f3 is best, offering the queen trade and defending the bishop at the same time. And according to the engines, Carlsen should trade now on f3, but instead he played a queen takes b2, which is slightly controversial. So it's, it does put some pressure on white. It's saying, I'm a pawn up now, what are you going to do about it? But white can say, by the same token, your knight is on the rim and my bishop's on d5. It's a brilliant piece, you can't move the knight, what are you going to do about it? So it works both ways. After rook a d1, white is threatening bishop f7 and then taking on d8. And as I said, the bishop is just clearly much stronger than the knight here. And black's problem is that the bishop is controlling the knight, but Carlsen has a way to get out of that after the next few moves. Oops, hold on a second. Yeah, we were here. Rook a d1, and now queen f6 is what Carlsen played. King h8 or rook d7 was also playable, but it creates some small tactical problems that obviously Carlsen didn't want. He preferred the structural problems instead. So queen f6, gf6, and Svidler on the live commentary said if Carlsen had envisaged this position after playing queen b2, if he had seen that this would be the position, it is unlikely that he would have played this line. So he must have maybe missed bishop f7 or something along those lines. So now we're going into an endgame, and white's getting the pawn back on a7 pretty easily. So it's kind of questionable as to whether Carlsen actually intended to take the game into this position or whether there was some kind of oversight. So again, the threat here is bishop f7, and again, black's problem is that the knight is completely out of the game. Carlsen has a sneaky way to get out of that though. After king g7, bishop f7 doesn't check anymore, so it's not going to matter. So rook takes a7, now knight c6, gets the knight back into the game with tempo, exploits the pin between the rooks. So the rook is attacked, and Anand elected for rook b7, but rook a4 threatening rook g4 check, which would be leading to a nice position, and also threatening rook c4 with a tempo on the knight. may have been better. And another advantage of rook a4 is that it stops what Carlsen played in the game, which was knight b4. So this is forcing simplifications now. Bishop b3 is forced, or bishop f3. Doesn't matter, the lines transpose. So rook d1, bishop d1, knight a2. And now the endgame is pretty much a guaranteed draw. So it was ultimately a well-played game by Carlsen, as he was clearly playing for a draw from the start. Next game, rook b6, knight c3, just threatening to take on d1 obviously. Bishop f3, f5, just to play knight e4, ensure the knight can escape, because again it's being controlled by the bishop, so it can't move towards the king side. So king g2, now rook d8, rook c6, knight e4, bishop e4, fe4, and this is going into an equal rook endgame. So they played on for a few more moves. Rook c4, f5, g4 to undermine e4. Rook d2, gf5, e3, rook e4, rook takes f2, king g3, rook f5, and at this point the draw was agreed. So it was an interesting game, and overall probably a small success for Carlsen, because he apparently avoided any prep from Anand and Anand's team, as well as securing a draw with relative ease. So the scores remain tied going into game 6, with everything still to play for. So I hope you enjoyed this analysis. Please leave any comments or thoughts. Thanks very much.